Amanda, I'm like, just laying here in my comfy clothes in my bed watching this meeting.
Dude, I'm telling you, it sucked the life out of me.
Imagine.
I didn't even come into work on Tuesday.
I couldn't even. I would not be able to sit that long. I'd be like,
dude, I was standing. No, I was standing
well,
the entire time because I had to run back and forth.
You only took 2 breaks, maybe 3, but the first one was like 2 hours long.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, it'll take me a bit to get screwed around here. Here we go.
Hello.
Hey,
Hi, Cameron.
How are you guys?
doing okay.
Oh, just hunky dory.
I started this meeting. The meeting started early. Not that we're starting the meeting, but I had Sam over here to help me get the YouTube link set up. So that's why it's active. Was active earlier. So we're not recording yet, but she got the link set up for me to save the file. So
Well, good.
Well,
man.
I can really hear you well. So, I mean, you're coming through loud and clear.
good.
Not always the case. Well, when you're in the big room over at the OC,
Oh yes,
there's been some echo.
that's set up. We use her laptop over there instead of mine, and there's I think a separate speaker or microphone.
Yeah.
I don't know that.
Yeah.
That's probably why.
Yeah. No, this is great. I'm going to mute myself just for a second.
Me too. I don't want you to have to listen to Barney Miller.
All right, no problem.
Christina, did anyone else say they weren't going to make it tonight? I saw one email.
Just the one.
Just the one?
You don't know where it's been. You don't know what's on the bottom. Well, I got 6. Who are we missing? Jean Ann
Jean Ann and Rex.
and Rex.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
I think early on, it may have been one of the times that Jean Ann wasn't available when we were trying to all get together and coordinate the best date that works.
okay.
Part of me thinks that this was one of the dates that she was having some difficulties with being able to attend.
Okay, well, we can get started anyway. If everybody's ready. Hello, everybody. Everybody doing well, I hope?
Hello.
Good. We're down nice and neat and waiting for all this nonsense to be over, I'm sure. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order and just jump straight down to 5 to the discussion, which is why we're here tonight. So Cameron, I'll let you and staff take it away.
Okay. So we've been staff-wise in the staff level, we've been discussing several ordinances or items that are similar to an ordinance that we have been working on. Our master list, we approximately have 48 items on our list that we've been reviewing, looking at as far as an update to an ordinance, some form of agreement that we probably need some direction from P&Z on, or drafting new ordinances. And so tonight we're going to focus on 11. The first 4 of the ordinances of the list are ordinances, one not necessarily being an ordinance. The tier map is more of just a recommendation of the board for the approval of a map. But the other 3 are ordinances, and these are items that we kind of brought up at the last meeting. So we're going to dig into these a little more detail and for some discussion and feedback. And we do anticipate these 4 items being on the agenda in the August meeting for official direction or action from the commission. So the first one on the list is the urban service area, which we call the USA, and the revised tier maps, the revisions of those maps, and an updated IGA with the county. At any time, if you guys want me to share a screen or something with you, the packet, by all means, interrupt me and I'll be happy to do that. The original ordinance was written back in 2008. I think April 2008 is the actual date of that ordinance, and it was an agreement that Ozark and Nixa had with the county. So in reviewing any applications in the county within these tier maps of the USA, the urban service area, the county would send those over to us for review and approval. Those would also determine if we need to annex in property or if it was too far beyond our services, and the county can let the applicant or developer develop it however meets their requirements. The focus of this one is, and I'm going to share I'm going to go ahead and share the meeting of the map just so you guys can see this. The tier maps. So if you guys can't see this, just holler at me, but the tier maps is tier 1, 2, and 3. So staff has went back and reviewed the existing tier map that we have on file that was approved and kind of reevaluated our boundaries of these tier areas. Based on services, based on utilities, how we can service these properties and the traffic capacities or the traffic and road systems out in those areas. But again, mostly it has to do with utilities, and then compact contiguous is kind of a caveat as well. So if you're looking at this map, the green areas that are shaded are the existing city limits of Ozark. The blue areas is what we call tier 1. The more of a yellow color is tier 2, and the pink is tier 3. For the most part, if we see an application in tier 3, we don't, staff on our level on the city side, we don't really do much with it. It's just too far beyond the reach of our capacities. But tier 1 and tier 2 is what we focus on a lot. So as we redefined this map and looked at those areas, we've came up with an internal map that's more just for the staff level, and then what we'd use to take any applications to the commission of what we broke in the tier 1 area up into tier 1A, B, and C. And with doing this, we've further defined those areas with definitions of what is appropriate to happen as far as the annexation, development, utilities, capacities. And so looking back kind of at the packet, you will see that in that we've kind of defined those tier 1 areas. So tier 1A would be an area where the incorporated community deems is appropriate for urban land development. So that means that the city, we've already determined what's in tier 1A. It is compact contiguous. We can serve it. The utilities are pretty much there on site. And so for the most part, it's a pretty much an easy yes that we can take this through and recommend approval as far as the annexation and development of that property. So those are basically the properties right on the perimeters of city limits. Tier 1B is taking that one step further. Those are areas that we would see appropriate for annexation or land development, assuming that they meet at least 2 of the criteria, one being compact contiguous or utility extensions are there on site or the utilities are available. There may be a situation where they might have to do an extension of a utility, but again, that's for the developer to determine if it makes feasible sense for him to make that extension. But again, if they will determine that they can extend that one utility and meet the 2 requirements of water and sewer, and it is compact contiguous, or they can make it compact contiguous, again, I don't see on the staff level that we have any concerns with the recommendations of annexation and development of this property. Now, tier 1C was one step further beyond that. That might take 2 of those items, 2 of those 3 critical items, responsibility of the developer to basically make them compact contiguous or bring those utilities to the property. Again, if they're willing to do this, and since it's in our tier 1A, or sorry, the tier 1 area, I don't think staff would have a concern with recommending approval of these, assuming that the developer would make those improvements along with his application, or agree to in his application. So this tier 1 A, B, and C map is really, like I said, more of an internal map to help guide staff for making these recommendations to the commission. The reason we're bringing this to you, though, is really to reapprove or adopt our tier 1, 2, and 3 maps of our urban service area, so we can kind of get those on file and an update to the county, since things have changed in the last almost a little over 10 years, or actually a little over 10 years. Things have changed as far as our city limits lines, our utility capacities. So again, it's just kind of updating that map. The IGA part of this is more just to solidify the relationship with the county. No action is necessarily needed from the commission on this portion. It's just really to get something updated on file between Nixa and Ozark and the county of updating this agreement. So in looking at that, what you guys will see then coming up in the meeting will just be kind of a recommendation on the tier map. At this point, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Like I said, it's really the focus is the tier 1, 2, and 3 map, and not necessarily so it's just the tier 1, 2, and 3 map.
Cameron, how close does this follow the SEMCOG map in the comp plan for the future? Is it close? Did you bring that into play when you were doing it internally?
Are you talking about for the land use map?
Yeah.
Yes. Honestly, we didn't look real closely at the future land use map. Our focus was more on the utilities and what Public Works had capacity to serve properties.
It just looked close.
Yeah. The SIMCOG in the comprehensive plan, they actually have a reference and show in there the existing urban service map that was created in 2008. So they will look fairly close when you compare the two. Unless you get down to details, you won't see a lot of differences. However, we have added utilities to the map for reference. So if you look at the red lines, those are the sewer lines. Didn't use green because it would conflict with the color in the background. And then the blue lines are water. So this map helps us to visually see quickly where those utilities are. But it did change the boundaries and actually kind of reduce some of the areas that we just felt like were too far beyond the reaches of our capacities at the time. Yeah, John, you're muted. You don't,
Got to mute, John.
yeah.
Hello. Got me?
Yep.
How come I'm seeing water lines in the blue out beyond the actual tier grids of the map on
Yep.
both sides up at the top? What does that mean exactly?
So those are water lines that have been extended or are outside the city. So up on the upper left, that's Fremont Hills. We sell
Okay.
Fremont Hills. The lower left is, Christina, Mandy, you might have to remind me, is it Pinecrest? No. You're muted, Christina.
It's the Finley one.
Finley, yeah, the Finley Valley. Yeah. So those are water lines that were out in the area long ago that we sell water to.
Okay.
On the upper east side or upper right, that's Well Run. There's some water lines out there. So most
Okay.
of this is older existing lines that have been extended outside the city or we have acquired over time.
That's quite a distance on that one to the south, isn't it? Wow.
Well, then the one to the south that I think there's a little bit of a story there about one of the mayors from
Of course there is.
about an extension to a subdivision. So,
Funny how
Oh,
that
yeah.
worked back then.
But what we've added to the map as well, just for reference, it kind of helps see the overall, the acreages. If you look in the legend in the lower left, if these areas start developing, which they are, we're seeing development, just in tier 1A, or sorry, tier 1 would be half the size our current acreage is now. And so I think we're going to start growing our our acreage the size of city limits fairly quickly over the next 10 years. And then just to further clarify, the tier 1 is probably more that 1 to 5 year time frame. Tier 2 is probably more like a 5 to 10 year, and tier 3 is unless something really happens from the applicant or developer side, I don't see much going on out in those areas for the most part for 10 to 20 years. If there's no other questions, we can go on the next item, but again, we'd be looking for the commission to make a recommendation of approval of the tier 1, 2, and 3 map at the next meeting.
Okay.
All right. Well, the next item on the list is the neighborhood meetings. So as we discussed before, we've been talking about this requirement of having the developers conduct or have a neighborhood meeting for their applications. The purpose of this is to basically to give the applicant and the neighboring property owners an opportunity to review the application prior to a public hearing and in meeting with the commission and boards. The applications, this would apply to any annexations, zoning changes or a zoning request, PUDs or planned unit developments, vacations of public right of way, and this is vacations that are not done by the city. So if it's a private entity requesting a vacation, and then the last thing would be a conditional use permit. This ordinance is something very similar to Springfield, and honestly, we've taken their ordinance and tweaked it, and along with some of their templates, and those are in the packet, and I can pull those up in a little bit as well. And so we've kind of modeled it after their ordinance. I really like the process as far as, especially on the municipality side. On the developer side, it is a little cumbersome, but I do think it works well for giving the neighbors and the developers an opportunity to have discussions prior to coming to the meeting. The requirement would this be, as far as the notifications, it would be a 500-foot area beyond the property line. Right now, any public notice is 185 feet, so this actually reaches beyond what a public hearing would require as notice. The meeting is not scheduled or attended by city or city staff. Not saying that probably the commissioner boards couldn't go to these, but generally they are not attended by the commission board or city staff. It's really just for the applicant and the neighborhoods to have discussions. Again, allow the citizens to ask questions. This would be a great opportunity where the citizens can ask details of what the developer plans to do when there are cases that we really can't have those discussions and take that into consideration. It would allow them to ask these questions and maybe get some of the questions answered and any kind of issues resolved before the public meetings. I'm going to pull up now the kind of the templates that we've been using that you also see in your packet. And again, these will be nearly identical to, right, scroll in the packet, identical to what the City of Springfield has been using for their templates or for their.
That up, I got a question on number B3, where it says it's recommended that the meeting be held early enough to provide time for the applicant to consider. Was there any consideration to actually putting dates in there, or making a little more of a hard line, or you think that this will work out?
Okay, on B3.
Yeah, under development applications, number 3, it says it's recommended that the meetings be held early enough. In other words, it's ambiguous.
Oh,
There is a time frame established for when the meetings are going to occur. So
Okay,
if you look at number 1, it states that the meeting must be held 20 days prior to planning and zoning. And then there's a reference in 2 that you have to give at least 10 days notice in the letter that's being issued to the people that fall within that 500-foot boundary.
okay,
Then there's an additional time frame that's on item number 6, which shows up on page 2 of the ordinance in my book. But it states that then they have to provide the follow-up to planning and zoning within 5 days following the meeting, but it has to occur 15 days prior to the P&Z meeting. So that kind of established that timeline.
okay. So really,
Yeah, so-
number 3 just is a moot point because you've got the times in there.
Yep. So in the packet, and we've clarified, and we set the time. Now the date of the meeting will just be something they can fill in based on the application, but we have requested a 4 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. And also in the other template, the notification process, we've actually noted that as well. That's what has been found to be the best time to get people that are working their day, time to get off work and get to these meetings, and the ones that want to come early to beat that time frame. So in that, like I said, in that ordinance, addition to those are these templates here. And so this notification process, it kind of outlines what has to happen at the meetings. It gives, again, the distance of notification, the number of days prior to the meeting, an affidavit that's got to be completed by the applicant. Generally, there's an affidavit that's signed that's in this template, along with the sign-in sheet, and then a list of any outstanding items that were discussed, resolved, or that may still be outstanding. So they kind of document that to provide to staff for our staff report to give to the commission and the board. Kind of outlines the actual neighborhood meeting time and dates, and then the summary, and the summaries that documents talk about. Then there's the affidavit template that they sign and return to us, along with just kind of the summary that they would complete and kind of explain any information that occurred at the meeting. And then this notice letter, this would just be a blank kind of template letter that staff would provide to the developer to stuff in the mailings to send out to the citizens, just to let them know kind of what's going on. And then here's kind of the other notice that would be provided so the applicant can send that out as well. So again, the goal is really to allow the citizens really to ask those unknown answers, to get the unknown answers to the questions prior to having the public meeting with the commissions and boards. I also think that this would take a lot of the frustrations off from the public meeting stance of trying to address the concerns of the citizens while at the same time kind of following the process for review and approval of the application. So if you guys have any questions, Amanda, if you have anything to add, or Christina or Bethany, you guys have anything to add?
Cameron,
Yeah.
this may be clear to everybody but me, but is this going to be a requirement period?
Yes,
to
it is
request?
required.
I mean,
Yep. So the way we've written the ordinance in these templates, it is a requirement for any application that's on the annexation, a zoning change, plan development, or planned unit development. We got a typo there we need to fix. A vacation or public right of way or a conditional use permit. So these are required, and we note at the end of this or the other template that there is a cutoff date. If staff doesn't receive this, I believe it was within 15 days prior to the Planning Zoning Commission meeting, then it will not get their item on the agenda. So yes, it's required that they report back to staff with the meeting follow-up and the documentation before we will include this in the packet. I would clarify too, the template documents, that's not something that I'll be attached as far as approval of the ordinance. Those are just be internal working documents for staff to use that we'll end up submitting with the application or the packet. But again, it won't be part of the approval of the ordinance process.
Okay, what's next?
All right, we'll keep moving. The next item on the agenda, the items of the ordinances is the conditional overlays. We've kind of briefly been talking about this, and the conditional use overlays is the purpose of this is to provide allow for a floating zone district to be established over a base zoning district. This would place limitations on a parcel in the form of a zoning condition, similar to what any existing zoning conditions would be, but these would be further conditions placed on those. The conditions would be placed by the staff prior to the application getting to the commission. Again, this would be based on some kind of feedback that we have received as a guidance from the commission and the board. The goal of this amendment is to reduce or alleviate any tensions between the proposed development of the property and the developed property neighboring that development. For example, like a new subdivision built to an existing subdivision, maybe there's a kind of conflicting thoughts on maybe lot size or maybe the rural versus dense development. But there's some things like this that we can kind of help put these conditions on the application prior to getting to the commission and the board. The considerations would be conditions such as increased buffer yards or landscaping, reduced heights. We did see something fairly recently on an application where some of the structures along our perimeter was reduced to not being allowed to be a 2-story structure or no more than 2-story structures, I believe. We saw that from the board. Increased setbacks from property lines or internal setbacks, increased open space requirements, restrictions on operations of the land use, including not limited to limitations of days of operation, noise level, intensity of use, lighting or signage. Those probably generally more fall to a commercial industrial type zoning. Increase the minimum lot area and dimensions. So maybe the overall lot size has to be increased. A reduction of building coverage. Right now, we don't really have a exact requirement on the building coverage. We just rely on setbacks and whatever the developer or applicant has to do to achieve parking or stormwater requirements. So that kind of dictates kind of what they're allowed to build as far as the total building size on a property. Off-site improvements directly related to intensity development. This is one of those that we'd need to further define before we place conditions as far as the legalities of this. But I know recently we've talked about transportation and traffic or utility extensions. Maybe there's a condition there that could be placed on this with the approval. And then last would be just any kind of modified design requirements. So again, this would kind of allow for staff to place conditions on our recommendation to the commission board for approval of a specific use going in based on some of the feedbacks that we received either from past examples, neighbors calling in, or based on the future land use map or the comprehensive plan, and then based on some of the things we have heard back or seen from the commission and board. Any questions on that one?
So what happens if a condition is put on by staff? You've been working with the developer and the neighbors and they are complaining about something and you decide to put that condition on the document before sent to us.
Mm-hmm.
Go through the steps of what would happen with the approval process of that particular condition.
In our staff report, we would note those conditions. And Amanda, I'll have you jump in a second. I'll note those conditions, or we will note those conditions in a report that we are recommending for the approval. However, after that point, I guess it's in the hands of the commission and board to have a little bit of kind of say on what they're wanting to approve or deny. But we would include those in our recommendation to the commission.
Okay, so if something comes to P&Z, we disapprove it, we move it on as it being disapproved to the Board of Aldermen. They have that ability to go back and override our disapproval or our veto on that. Is that correct? Like anything else?
Amanda, if you want to add, but I suspect, yeah, like anything else.
Yes, to answer that direct question, the Board of Aldermen has the authority to either accept the recommendation of the planning and zoning or not follow that recommendation. So it would go forward to them.
Okay.
However, it would be ideal, and how I've seen this work in other jurisdictions, usually there's communication from the board and the Planning and Zoning Commission to staff that establishes a policy of how this ordinance is going to work. And so the staff is cognizant of that policy before they make the recommendations. And so it's going to be brought up at those points of tension to alleviate those in circumstances where it would likely be approved because it's already something that the boards have indicated they want.
Okay, that makes sense. Yes, John.
Does this have anything to do with the variance board? Does it work like that at all? Is it get in the way of that? Does it cut out any kind of variance applications, or is this a totally separate thing?
This is separate. Oh, sorry, Cameron, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead. You're going to say the same thing, I imagine, but yes, it is a separate issue, variance board or board of adjustments. There's criteria in our ordinances for what they deal with and look at. This would be a zoning issue that we would place these expectations on a property for the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Board of Aldermen.
So one more question and I'll leave you alone. Then maybe not. So a condition is put on an application and sent to us. What if that condition is outside the scope of what we're there to talk about that night? What if we're there to talk about annexation and and I'm not saying, and you probably won't even do this, but let me just ask the question. So we're there talking about annexation and someone wants to talk about the number of the lot sizes. You wouldn't put a condition on that at that stage, would you?
No, you wouldn't put a condition on an annexation, but you could certainly talk about it if that was something that you wanted to, but it would really be more appropriate at the zoning stage, because the way that this works, it is a floating zone. So you have your underlying zone that's appropriate for the density and the use of the property. And then you have this zone that kind of works in conjunction with that and I'm going to steal the words of a former coworker of mine, but you take that underlying zone and you ratchet it down. You're like restricting what's allowed on that property under the current zoning code to alleviate those tensions with existing development or things that you find desirable in that area. And it allows you some greater control for that underlying zoning.
Okay.
So, and what I would add to that is this is really for zoning request. It wouldn't be an annexation request.
Yeah, I just use that as an example.
Well,
Where to take us out of our lane that we try to stay into.
well, I could see us though hearing some feedback to the annexation discussion and using that when staff makes a recommendation in our report for the zoning. Now, if they're on the same night, same agenda, then that kind of puts it out. But anyway, that the intention of this would be on the zoning request applications.
Yeah, yes.
One thing to point out, this works in conjunction with the neighborhood meetings. So the example that was given about the annexation, if there were questions from the neighboring property owners that came to the hearing about annexation, I would hope that the neighborhood meeting that was required would have alleviated some of those questions, and then it would alleviate that issue being brought up at the annexation in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So these two kind of work in conjunction to add that element of additional communication, and it really provides that to the neighboring community in addition to allowing additional control over the zoning.
Okay.
Cameron,
Yeah.
it seems, just trying to read through this, is this kind of open-ended? Where kind of anything can be considered when we're looking at zoning to try to give the ability of the staff / neighboring communities to, I don't know what to say, but get what they want versus what could be, but and then where do you find the line to draw when enough's enough?
Yeah, I don't see it being an open. Again, this would further restrict what could happen on that property. So at the end of the day, if we didn't put any restrictions, it could follow whatever the base zoning is and proceed. So I agree with Amanda as far as the neighborhood meetings. This would actually give us a lot of insight to what we might want to make recommendations for. So it would further restrict an application. Honestly, I would imagine, I'm going to guess and just take a broad guess that I imagine maybe we wouldn't see this no more than 10 or 20% of the time on a zoning request. Most of the time, they're probably going to follow just the straight zoning. But based on kind of the surrounding neighbors and land uses, we might see a reason to have some of these restrictions further placed.
So really, we could see this as simplifying the process of allowing variances to come about and not having to stay strict to a particular zoning?
Well, no, it,
It's,
No?
yeah, you'd still be strict to that base zone. This would just further restrict it. I would kind of think of it kind of like a PUD where you're taking a base zoning and actually applying additional restrictions on a property just to make it more cohesive with the surrounding developments.
Okay.
a good example would be where you have a neighborhood next to an undeveloped property, and the undeveloped property is going to request a zoning that may not mesh well with the neighboring properties. And this ordinance can be used to increase the buffer yard, increase the setbacks to alleviate some of that concern about how that property will be developed while still falling within the appropriate zoning classification.
Chuck, if I may, I like this because I think we're going to start seeing more development along the river. And this gives you some ability to put some restrictions in there about types of grasses you plant or something along those lines, so that you can kind of allow some development but manage water quality and that type of thing along the river.
Don't get me wrong, Nathan. I think this is a great idea. I really do. I think it's going to alleviate a lot of the problems. I guess my point is, from an orchestration standpoint, as we're running through the meeting, that we just want to make sure we stay on point, and there aren't any conditions put in there that are inappropriate to the point that we're trying to make that particular night, be that annexation, be that zoning, or whatever. So I guess that was my point. I think that was kind of Jeff's point too.
Yeah.
Where things could be put on. And I know staff isn't going to do this, but I just feel that we just need to make sure that we're comfortable with the fact that we don't want open-ended ideas that are outside of our scope of that particular evening. But the overall idea, I think, is great.
And the intention is for staff to place these conditions on there. In my mind, I see that if the commission or board doesn't agree, they might remove conditions, but I don't know that they'd further place conditions on the application.
Go ahead, John.
Well, I really get this now, and I understand that it could be a great tool for in certain circumstances. So how, this is sort of like an inside game. How do you get the word out about something like this? I mean, does everybody have to know the entire book of ordinances, or are developers aware of this when they go in, or this is an unusual way of looking at certain areas of the city. I like it a lot, but how do people know about it?
It'll just be based on staff guiding the developer. I mean, if they come in,
Okay.
there's a lot of times they will come in and say they want to do a single family subdivision. Right off the bat, they always want to request R1D. So it'll be a document that we can look at the surrounding land uses, knowing what we have heard and seen guidance in the past, the neighborhood meetings, and staff could recommend, hey, we can recommend approval of this. However, let's agree to these conditions that we will further place on your application.
I think it's great.
Additionally, Springfield does this as well, and this is where we got the ordinance from. And so some developers who have worked with Springfield would be familiar with this concept.
Cameron, who actually sends out the letters? Does the city still do that, or?
Well, there wouldn't be a letter on this. This isn't like a public notification other than the application of the normal notice that we would send out. So the actual packet would be the one that has the conditions placed on this. There's not an additional letter that would be sent out for notification.
Well, when they have the meeting, how do we know that they invited everybody they were supposed to invite?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking about the neighborhood meeting?
Yes.
Conditional overlay. The neighborhood meeting, they are required to actually contact the county to get the 500-foot mailing list and provide us a copy of that list and a copy of the proof of mailings.
Huh.
So that is the same process as when they do the 185-foot mailings that we follow.
Okay, is that it, everybody? All right, Cameron, there you go, bud.
All right, we'll move on. The next item was the dedication of property on plats or the final plats. Right now, the current ordinance will note common areas on plats to be noted as dedicated to the public. We kind of briefly discussed this at our last meeting. It does note in the ordinance that it'll be maintained by the HOA. However, it has caused confusions in the past, and where the land, everyone has made the assumption the land was dedicated to the city. Therefore, the city does maintain and take care of some of those properties. And we do see several of those locations occurring today. Properties were never actually, in some cases, were never actually dedicated to the HOA. Some cases are still owned by the developer. So what we've done is we've actually proposed a modification of the ordinance to actually state dedicated for public use, implying it is dedication to the public for their use, not necessarily dedicated to the public as far as the city ownership. We also took it a step further and note with the maintenance that the maintenance and ownership remains the HOA. And then however, if they dissolve that HOA, then it defaults back to the property owners in that subdivision. So it places a caveat in the ordinance that, hey, if there is not an active HOA, then the property owners in that subdivision are obligated to maintain those common areas, which a lot of time are the detention basins. So this process would go hand in hand with our code enforcement that as we try to enforce maintenance of those properties, and if it might be with the developer and LLC, we can't, there's no way of going after those developers or getting a formal contact. So this would allow us to actually contact and hold the HOA accountable or the landowners within that development to make sure these properties are maintained.
How do you determine the fees? Say, for example, here in Apple Creek, there's a park here
Yeah.
that, and we don't have an active HOA. So let's just say, for example, that this was a whole new project
Yep.
and we don't have an HOA and we have this park over here. So there's 200 and some odd homes over here in the Apple Creek area. Would each one of them get a bill for a portion of that, or how does that work?
So the HOA fees, that's all determined by developer. What this,
No, we don't have an HOA. I mean,
so
take care of the park area.
yeah. So if we had a code enforcement complaint, I don't necessarily see us taking care of the actual equipment. But if we have to go and mow that property, we would contract with the mowing company. They'd send us an invoice, and then at the end of that invoice would be divided amongst the number of property owners and be assessed on their tax assessment for the recouping of that cost.
There's the answer to my question. Thank you.
Yeah. And we have, on a side note, we have been coordinating with the collector's office at the county to kind of coordinate how we need to get them documentation if we run into this situation where we're actually paying to mow property.
Just a note of, in addition to that, there would be notice required under ordinance prior to placing that assessment on the properties. So that would be followed in that situation too.
No other comments on that one? Okay, there you go, Cameron, go ahead.
All right. So the next item is we've kind of talked about this one for quite some time, and we actually had a proposal to you guys a while back and kind of hit a roadblock on that. But single family residential lot size. In your packet, I put the chart in there to kind of a quick reference to what the existing requirements are as far as lot size. That's been a lot of the discussion. The past proposal was to create 2 new single family zoning districts, which would replace the existing 4 that we have now. As we kind of discussed at the previous meetings and we further evaluated and looked into this, it's just not clear exactly how to handle those existing zoning districts as far as if someone wants to redevelop those properties, if the house was demoed for some reason, they need to reconstruct. If there's existing property out there that's already zoned that hasn't been developed, or if they want to request a new district. So we didn't have a clear way of handling those, and we also felt it wasn't probably feasible or advisable to just try to rezone the entire city for this new zoning district. So the recent discussions have been more the thought of just re-clarifying the existing 4 that we have, or redefining those to help give staff a better guidance on when it's appropriate to make a recommendation for a zoning district. So in the packet, I noted in there some examples of some of the proposed revisions, and for the most part for R1A, we would not plan to change any kind of the lot square footage size, but I want to make it clear, mostly to staff and then for the commission board as well, that where is it appropriate to recommend approval of these zoning districts? Rarely will we probably see a request for this, but if we see something on the very far outskirts of town that's all by the county land, that maybe by 3-acre lot subdivisions, staff is probably going to guide the developer and say our recommendation is going to need to be R1A for those areas. The next one would be R1B, maintaining that 15,000 square foot size, but really trying to focus more on this being more of that transitional area between an R1A area and the downtown area that's more dense. I would recommend, or the discussion was to modify the R1C to maybe reduce that to that 8,000 square foot that we kind of had proposed before with our new development or new single family zoning district. And then again, also to clarify, this would be between more of those R1B areas in downtown and maybe kind of encroach more in downtown. I will add though that R1C is the majority of the zoning districts across town. So it's something we just kind of have a better understanding where it's appropriate to have those.
Cameron, can I ask a question?
Yep.
My packet goes from final plat application to procedures for rental inspections. I don't see. I don't see.
I'm sorry. I'm on page 5, back up in kind of the overall ordinance list. We don't have. We didn't have.
I'm sorry. I was just scrolling down and following as we went.
No, and yeah. Sorry, I should have clarified that. Some of these items that's on this list of 11 don't have any supplemental information to go with it.
Gotcha.
Really, the go on a lot of these is really just to kind of get some additional feedback before we propose a draft ordinance. Again, looking back, our single family, it didn't go as well as I had hoped early on, because I think we just need to do a little more research about those existing zonings. But however, and then R1D is really trying to redefine that to our second zoning that we were discussing about, and not really on a minimum lot size, but more that units per acre, in some more creative criteria for those developments. There was one caveat in R1D now that has about the coving of streets, which is required. But I would caution, and as I noted here in this, that R1D is probably more appropriately downtown. However, we have a defined grid system. So you're not going to have that ability to cove streets in the existing area that's already potentially have streets in development. So with that, so that's kind of some of the recent discussions on this. Again, after looking back, we didn't want to try to send out any kind of public notification to rezone the entire city for the new zoning districts. It also would be a little bit of a struggle of trying to have these 4 existing ones in our zoning book and then add these 2 additional ones. So now we're end up with 6 that we kind of got to have to juggle with and handle as we progress further on. In addition, the one thing I would want to point out too is if the focus for sure is to get density, which is better bang for our buck on development side and impacts on services, this would leave it open for those perimeter parts of the city as we grow, that we would be left with these larger developments. Larger lot development. So one of the caution things to point out. So with that, I mean, any kind of thoughts and feedbacks on that, and maybe this kind of direction with single family, or do we want to pursue the direction we had kind of started before and go down that road a little further? Again, just kind of like to have some feedbacks on these 4, maybe redefining the 4 existing zonings.
Go ahead, John.
I was sort of getting into the other idea. And the reason was based on the presentation that was made to us from MSU. And I was also, I know how it works downtown. So I've just sort of been, I know what a struggle it would be. At the same time, I thought it sort of coincided with what we may be facing in the next 2 or 3 decades. But I don't have the expertise really to talk about it with regard to detail or even to compare it properly. But from a touchy-feely kind of way, I was fascinated by that idea. The sort of smart zone approach to kind of way the town may or may not grow in the future. So it's just sort of like that's where my brain has been sometimes with regard to this. So just throwing that out there. And so has that just been completely abandoned? And we're sort of back where we are, where we've always been? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it's abandoned. To give it kind of a comparison, we have property right now that's zone C3, which is a commercial zoning. However, our code book has nothing in there about C3. It just removed probably back in 2009. So as those properties develop, redevelop, there's always that struggle. What do we do? Because there's no guidelines for how to develop that property. So I think if we proceed with the way before, there may be a consideration of either leaving the R1A, B, and C, and D in the code book with the understanding we'll no longer zone these properties, or two, if they are existing zoned this way and they need a redevelopment, then they're probably going to have to go through a rezoning process to bring it in compliance. There will be the situations where maybe the property won't even meet the criteria because a lot of the lots downtown won't meet the R1C requirement, which would have been that 8,000 square foot or our RSF proposal that we originally had. They won't meet that 8,000 square foot lot. So then there would probably be a lot of variance requests for redevelopment of any of those lots. So I'm not saying we've scrapped the idea of just trying to figure out the best way of approaching this and not make it more cumbersome at the end.
I agree with you, Cameron, that I think we need to stay away from forcing ourselves into an issue of rezoning the entire town. I think that would be catastrophic.
Right. And that was a recommendation from Springfield when they tried to do it as well. It got to be catastrophic.
I understand how catastrophic it could be to try to do the entire town. I think the way I was looking at it was as the outlying tiers, actually, is the way I was seeing where the zoning options are reduced based on the outliers as we grow out, actually. So there is more of almost like an aesthetic appeal that would come from those kinds of options where, not every lot size is the same. You could have pocket communities, all that kind of stuff, which I thought, when just based on the initial conversations we had about it, seemed pretty unique and charming for our community.
So with that thought process, meaning that means that the other four would still have to remain in our ordinance, knowing that we wouldn't be able to make any recommendation or approve any zoning that. However, we have this new zoning district, and we probably would still struggle on these more outlying areas when we're trying to butt these larger lot subdivisions. But no, I agree. I mean, I think the other two is really attractive. The proposal is really attractive and something that would be great. It's just not quite sure exactly how to handle the existing conditions today and the ordinances that we have in place of the other four.
Is your plan to continue to research this as you go? And you can't.
Well, yes.
Kind of a plan, and then bring it back at some other time.
Yes, and so from what I've heard so far, John has spoke up. It sounds like really still focusing on those two proposals that we had before is the way that the commission would like to see it go. Now, if anyone else wants to speak up, but that sounds like that's the direction we've been given to this point.
I'll throw out there to the commission. What direction do you want to see them take this?
Well, if I could just say, one of the reasons that we started talking about it in the beginning was the idea of the cookie cutter, blocked up farmland being turned into all this sort of modular looking housing over time, like rolling prairie, some of that stuff. And so we were looking for more interesting ways of approaching zoning with regard to how, in my mind, how the community is going to grow. We already have basically that zone in effect downtown, and the presentation that was coming from MSU was talking about how well that works because of the walking community aspects and stuff like that, which was, very attractive to me. I'm not saying that we have to zone the entire town that way, but I always thought it, in my head, I had it going as we go out into some of these subdivisions that are taking the peripheral tiers, then the options would actually decrease to the point where, in a way, although I would say that there are all kinds of options based on this approach. So it's just having to switch from one horse to the other. Obviously, anybody can do that, but those were my questions.
So you look for some kind of direction of how you think that we want to see you move forward right now to stay where we're at, and then to have you continue to research to find a way to be able to do this that makes sense, or you don't want to shelve this idea. I'm not sure anybody wants to shelve the idea.
No, and
John's got a point, but to try to do it all right now might be a bit of a challenge. So is everyone in agreement that we want to just kind of stay where we're at right now, and then have staff continue to look? Is that what the commission is wanting?
I think that'd be a good idea. Just kind of stay where we're at right now, and then bring back to us some options, some more options. So I agree with what John's saying, but we're not there. I know years ago they talked about rezoning the whole city. This is when the city was much smaller, and it wasn't a good idea. So I think hold off, let staff do some more research and bring it back to us.
when you say options, what do you mean by more options? I guess more direction on how to handle the existing zoning to make a transition to the two new zonings, or what are you implying there?
There was things in the new zoning, I believe, that I was having issues with. So right now you're looking at kind of going back to our zoning that we had 6 months ago or so. Is that not right?
So the two options for consideration in my mind would be, one, to proceed with the two proposed rezonings that we had, or two proposed zonings that we had a few months back, that would actually eliminate the 4 existing we have now and determine how we handle those existing zonings or redevelopment of those existing zonings. Or the second option would actually go back and take the existing 4 zonings and further define those, redefine those, so staff knows when it's appropriate to make a recommendation to the commission. Again, I have never had a developer since I've been here request R1A, but it seems like that's been a holdup on some of these outlying developments where staff has recommended approval of a lesser zoning or smaller lot size, but it kind of got a little bit of a hang up at the commission board level. So I guess my proposal would be to redefine those to further give staff guidance on exactly when it's appropriate to recommend the zoning or not to the commission.
Anyone have any more thoughts on that?
I've got a question, if you don't care. If we were to go to the recommended 2 new zoning proposals, would the floating overlay give the ability to enlarge lot sizes if it's touching a bigger lot size development or the outlying tiers? Does that overlay allow you or us that ability to put another restriction on that zoning at the time if we were to go to the 2?
Yeah, so say if there was an application for the proposed zoning we had before was RSF that had that 8,000 square foot minimum, that would be our kind of our main single family zoning, the one zoning. Based on the conditional overlay proposal or ordinance that we had just talked about, it does note increased minimum lot area and dimensions. So it would allow for a conditional overlay to be placed on that base zoning to require maybe a larger lot size. Now, it may be that the larger lot sizes are on the perimeter of the development, like we've kind of had some discussions in the past where it butts a bigger development or a bigger lot development. But yeah, there is a stipulation in there to allow a condition like that to be placed.
Okay, well, you're not looking for obviously any action tonight, so you're wanting an action for in 2 weeks. If you think if the commission wants to continue
Yeah.
on with the
Yeah.
with the smaller lot sizes and
I'll clarify again. The only thing in 2 weeks will be those first 4 items. This one is number.
okay, all right, this okay, that's right.
It's just really just discussion and feedback now, just to help give us some direction of what the commission wants to see.
Obviously, there's still a lot of questions on this.
There is, and honestly, even if it's a follow-up email, or maybe we have another meeting again to discuss this further after people's had more thoughts, we can definitely look into kind of handle those existing zonings a little more. But we can continue to have these discussions as we're doing some additional research and come back to the commission with an updated report. But we're not looking for any action at the moment.
I think that's a great idea. Just keep digging, and as you
Okay.
find something, some community may have already figured this out.
Yep.
And bring it back to the commission. I got a feeling everybody kind of wants to head that way at some point.
Well, and honestly, and if that's the case, I don't want to keep digging on dealing with the existing 4 and trying to tweak that or make that work if the thought is to go to these other 2. So I kind of like to have some direction which way to dig.
There you go, John.
Yeah, I just, the only reason that I'm speaking up and everybody's kind of having these same thoughts is that I thought we were going that direction, until just like now, until I started getting into the packet and going, wait a minute, this is all what we have now. We're going to just do that. I thought we were going to maybe we need to have more discussions about the possibility of a different type of zoning, I think, because I think people were excited about it because of what it might look like and the way it could be attractive and turn into be a valuable part of our community. There's a uniqueness about it that I found really attractive because living downtown, I know what it feels like to live in a walking community. And when you go out into the peripheral part of our town, which is growing out into the county, there's none of that. It's just these cookie cutter things. And so that's why I got us started on this. And there was research done by Mr. Poston, I believe, about it. So I don't know. Yeah, I think we need to keep talking about it. I think that would be the proper approach now, just based on where we are.
Chuck, if I may.
You betcha. Go right ahead.
There was 2 things I was hoping to address, and Cameron's right. We just weren't ready. We need to put the brakes on this and sort it out. But the 2 problems was one, just creativity. How do you give a developer a little bit of a creativity so they can respond to market demand? The second part, and this one's a bigger problem that I don't think we fully understand yet, which is economics. There needs to be a certain level of density for everything to pay for itself. And so if you're going to have an R1A over here, then over there, we need some apartments. Over the course of the entire town, we need to maintain a certain level of density or this thing doesn't cash flow and all, you know what I mean? It just doesn't pay for itself. So that was the second piece that we were trying to resolve here. So if anybody wants to do a little homework and listen to a podcast or read some blog posts on that, I could sure use some help because I'm having a hell of a time sorting it out.
Yeah, well, I can see how difficult it would be. That's why I actually thought, and I guess I've been corrected. I actually thought it was going to be tier specific. As we grow out, this is going to be the options actually get reduced from the 4 to the 2. That's what I thought in my head. I mean, is that something we could look at? And then also, I'd like to hear from Amanda's dog.
It's a cat.
Oh, a cat. I want to hear from Amanda's cat on all of this.
I guess in my mind, I never thought it'd be of combining the 2 and have it part of being the tier out. I think my concern when I hear the word tier is if we stick with the 4, we're still going to be seeing those outer skirts of the tier of these larger developments. And that concerns me about the density issue and then the return on investment of our infrastructure out in those areas where we're not getting a lot of as much lots developed on those infrastructure components. There is a better return on our investment with the density. But I was thinking in my mind, it was either the 4 or the other 2 and not having both.
I'm in that same boat where it's either, you can't have both. It's either 2 or 4. And if it's 4, you're gonna have to redefine them. But yeah, you can't, I agree, we can't have both. But as everyone keeps saying, we're just not ready. So keep the discussion going.
Okay. How about we'll further look into how to handle the existing ones if we make a transition to the other 2, and then once we're ready, we'll report back to the commission.
Everybody good with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a way to look at the existing 4 and kind of hone in, like maybe you were talking earlier, I believe, about the R1C, which everybody wants. Find the ones that's going to be the most attractive to the developer and somehow hone in on those. Maybe the overlay could work to some degree with regard to what the staff could recommend. Maybe those recommendations could come to the commission for guidance. So you go to where the developers, what the developers want, and then somehow try to craft that into options that maybe make sense for the way we're going to be growing in the next couple of decades. Is that possible?
Yes, that was kind of the goal of the original 2, was to take R1C and basically recreate those, basically what we're seeing as far as requests, and have that creativity. So yes, that's kind of how I approach those new 2 as we had before.
Yeah, I just saw everything becoming, we were all talking about R1C, and so all of a sudden we had these 2, and I'm going, that's just a way to break up the R1C into something that gives, more creativity to the developer, if we can find the right developer to do those things. I mean, we also had that discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, the talk shall continue.
All right. The next 2 items are on there, just kind of let you know that these will be coming. These are mainly been produced in Public Works, but they are reviewing the OTO transportation study analysis that has been provided to the city for review. So Public Works is reviewing that and will be making recommendations at some point back to the commission and the board for adoption of this study that kind of defines our standards for our traffic improvements, traffic studies, what's required for the developments when they make application. The next one is I kind of didn't update the bullets, but this is really just to review the Public Works design standards. After reviewing the OTO study and kind of taking in some of the discussions in the past, I would anticipate there will be some updates to those design standards. And as we've worked with those, I think they updated those back in 2018. As we've continued to work on those and fine tune those will be coming back to the commission for consideration. So nothing really necessarily as far as discussion at the moment on those 2, unless you guys have any ideas or discussions you want to add. Okay. Moving on, the next item was the rental inspections. There's been some recent discussions again about the rental inspections. So the city has been looking into this a little more again on the inspection side. This would actually assist with implementing both the registration of an owner or the legal contact of a property and not a registered agent. A lot of times when it's a registered agent, it's difficult to reach out to them, to contact them, or to follow up with any code violation or complaints. And then just for life safety inspections. We do have a lot of renters that find out we don't have an inspection process that call the city requesting that we do, or would like for us to have something put in place. This would also provide a name to the city and not an LLC like we often struggle with. So we actually have a physical person that we can hold accountable on the properties or if there's a nuisance violation. We have looked at a couple cities in the packet. I've kind of given a couple documents from example from Nixa. Another city is Columbia, and Springfield might have something out there as well. Kind of would stagger an inspection. So we identify an inspection process, a regular inspection process on rental properties. Maybe the first inspection is right immediately when they get ready to move in, and after that, we've kind of staggered those on a 3-year rotation. or if there's a complaint filed by a tenant, then we can follow up and request an inspection at that time, or a change in tenants, any kind of inspections there. So in your packet, you should have seen kind of this inspection checklist that Nixa has. That something we'd probably, if this is something we'd proceed with, we'd probably take that as an example as a go by that we'd put in place. Now, I didn't actually find an actual ordinance in Nix's website yet, and I reached out to them and didn't hear back yet. But it may just be a process where they actually require rental inspections, and they just have this this process that they go and inspect and go through this checklist for what they're looking at and the criteria. So in your packet in page 26 and 7 kind of highlights the process that Nixa has. Just wanted some feedback from the commission. If you guys think rental inspection is a good thing, I know not far before I got here, it might have actually been an item on the agenda that got tabled. The meeting before I first came to the city, it was on there, and I think there were some heated discussions or pushbacks from some of the maybe citizens. May have been on the ownership side, but I think as far as the tenants living in those facilities, I highly suspect most of those would be all for an inspection process. And as a reminder, the city does get quite a few requests asking why they were not doing rental inspections on properties.
Okay, what are our comments? Any thoughts on this? Yes, sir. Go right ahead, Daryl.
I think it's a pretty good idea to be able to protect and make sure the rental, especially apartments and stuff like that, that could have some underlying fire issues or something like that. I think it's a good idea that they need to be inspected. At least when one tenant leaves and another tenant comes in.
Have there been very many,
I'm sorry, what was that?
have there been very many complaints or requests?
Yes, we, on a regular basis, we will get calls from people calling in about rental inspections. And so I would say we might hear 1 or 2 a month of people requesting or asking about rental inspections. This would also be something that would get put in place that would have, once I suspect sometime down the road, we will have a discussion about, a further discussion about short-term rentals. So it would be something that would further assist with stuff like that as well. But yes, there was a fairly lengthy back and forth email a few weeks ago between a tenant and a landlord that the city got kind of roped into that we just kind of stayed out of it because we don't have a process that I think they got it worked out, but the tenant was not happy and was not getting any results from the landlord to take care of any issues.
Yes, Daryl.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead and finish your point, Pete.
I agree that I think that's a good idea. That I know that there can be there can be some issues, and I think it's a good idea.
Go ahead, Daryl.
Yes, Cameron, what is your definition of short-term rental? You talking motels or?
No, Amanda, he might help me, but there is a defined definition as far as the timeframes. What I'm kind of thinking about right at the moment is more as the thoughts of these Airbnbs or that aren't truly rental properties that are with one tenant, but these people that are coming in for a few nights or a week and renting these properties. But there is some guidelines as far as number of days that they can be rented out for. But again, I'm thinking more of the Airbnb side for short-term rental.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, go right ahead, sir.
Yeah, I had to unmute. I just want to chime in, not from the mayor's standpoint, but from a realtor standpoint, that I think that's a good idea. In fact, I think it's a great idea to move Ozark into the 20th century. That's as important as planning and zoning. Otherwise, we get a bad rap of having a bunch of slumlords, but it will get a lot of pushback. So you'll just need to organize the presentation. but I personally would support it. And I think for the most part, the Realtor Committee, which is a very large organization, would probably do that. I've had rental property in Nixa before, and I didn't have a problem. It made sense to me. Whenever you change tenants, in order for that new tenant to hook up to the utilities, they had to have a rental inspection. And I don't remember now, it's been so long, I don't remember who paid for it, but there's just a certain level of quality and safety that you need to have. And I support that, but you have to tiptoe. I mean, not everybody wanted to wear seat belts. Not everybody wanted to stop smoking in restaurants. And I'm not going to go where the masks are. It's just a process. You know, it'll take a while, but just the fact that we've had complaints and tenants calling, they expect Ozark to have that. And we're not a little tiny podunk town anymore with a bunch of little houses for sale. We got a bunch of little houses, but I think we need to have quality rentals and for the protection and safety of the people, because not everybody can afford a house. So I'm in favor.
Rick, were you a part of the Nixa ordinance? Were you, because you had rental properties over there, did you get involved with the
Yes,
with
I
the process
did.
at all?
Yeah, I did. I had one time I had 3, and this was probably 15 years ago, but their ordinance is that old. It's been around for a long time. And I don't remember what the cost was, but before I could rent it to somebody else, I had to pay for an inspection. I'm pretty sure I had to pay for it. And they had to have that inspection pass the new tenant before they could hook up their utilities. So it has some teeth in it. No, if you don't pass, the new people can't get utilities, and neither can you for that matter.
Yeah.
So,
Just as a reference, the fee in Nixa, the current fee is $25. I'm not sure how they calculate it, but it would just be part of our fee study, and we'd determine what that appropriate fee would
man,
be.
I don't think it was any more than that, Cameron, way back when. That's nothing.
They probably haven't
landlord-
changed it. Yeah.
Well, but a landlord's not a good landlord, and the ones that don't like that and think that's crazy, they're renting for $300 a month, and they probably are a piece of junk, and they're not taking care of things. So we don't need those people. But that's just my thought.
So Rick, back in the day when they were bringing this forward, was there quite a bit of pushback from the real estate world over there?
I don't remember when they brought it forward, because they've had it as long as I can remember.
Ah, okay.
And I remember a long ways back.
When-
Chuckle.
I'm pretty sure this came before the commission, maybe about April 2017. I had gathered it was nearly a packed house. Do you recall kind of?
There was quite a bit of discussion. I mean,
Okay.
and it was only discussion. We weren't there to take any action. And there were quite a few realtors. I'm not sure it was packed, but there were quite a few realtors in there talking about it.
Okay, well, unless anyone else has any other comments, what I'm hearing though is we will proceed with working on this and plan to have a discussion item in the draft ordinance at some point to the commission in the next few months, probably.
Cameron, I would like to mention, I went through them in Springfield with rental property, and Springfield is so unorganized and unhelpful and terrible about coming to do the inspection. I'm sure we can do better.
Yeah,
It was
we can
terrible.
definitely do better. I think the bigger struggle we would have is as the tenant leaves and the new tenant comes in, is just keeping after the owners of the facilities to let us know or get these inspections. What'll be a signification to us, or something that lets us know, is when they sign up for utilities with our water department. When someone signs up for a new water service, then we'll know that there's a new tenant going in there, and we'll need to follow up with them.
Go ahead, Rick.
Do we have the personnel to inspect?
Yes, yeah, it would fall under the current inspector now, or our code enforcement officer. They both kind of double up on some of the inspections. So yes, it wouldn't cause at least in the initial time, we wouldn't plan to add any staff to take care of this. We just have to kind of see how it goes and use our existing staff to handle these inspections.
Go ahead, Rick.
Rick, you're muted.
You're muted, Rick.
Unmute.
There you go.
No, you're muted.
All right. Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, technology. Begins with a T, which stands for trouble. All right, anyway. I can tell you, there is not a bigger frustration for a landlord, and I have been through this, than to have a tenant move out, and you've got somebody that wants to move in, and they have to move in. They need some place to go, that you've agreed to terms, but they can't move in because you can't get an inspector there. And that's something that it really affects. It's not just the landlord's livelihood or the owner's livelihood. It's the convenience of the tenant. They can't move in and get utilities unless you can get that inspection done right away. And so that needs to be at least a 1 day turnaround. You can't have a 3-day wait period. Now there may be times.
Our current, oh, sorry.
That's all right.
Our current inspection process, if someone calls in for an inspection, this would be treated the same way. By 7 a.m., it'll be inspected that same day.
Perfect.
So it, and
yeah, if you can do that, that is absolutely fine. But if you start having this for all the rentals in town with all the apartments we have, I mean, it's possible that you could have 20 new inspections a day.
yeah,
Possible.
and that's, like I said, that, I mean, it's something new that right now our current plans would utilize the existing staff we had. I mean, once we kind of get going, we'll have a better feel for it. And you're right, on these apartment sides, there may be quite a bit, but it's just something we just have to work out and handle as we.
Well, I'm in favor. That's just something that it has to work.
Yeah.
I would think once the landlords and the owners understood that we're doing this, everybody, with the exception of a few, everybody's going to give 30 days notice. So, you got a little bit, with the exception of a few, maybe some are going to walk away, but they, they'll know that they're going to have an inspection. They don't want it empty any more than we do. Okay, where are we going next?
Yep. Make a note here. Next item on the discussion is dark skies. I'm going to
should have been number 1, but I'm not going there. That's okay.
Maybe the best for last, but we got a couple after this. Anyway,
Chuck and I agree. Let's just vote on it now.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just get her done. I mean, it's perfect.
So just to kind of recap what has happened in the past, and Amanda and Bethany have really been grateful and helped us out on this one, and I'll let them add to the discussion on this one. There was a proposed ordinance back in, I believe, 2016 that was, I don't know if it was just a discussion item or if it was just a presentation of the commission, but it kind of halted at some point. That document that included in the packet of that ordinance in 2016. We also have included an ordinance that not too long after I got here, and we had Cochran on contract for our third-party engineering review. They had worked on drafting an ordinance as well based on what some of the research they have done. We've also included the I want to say a guiding ordinance or a model ordinance from IDA, or the International Dark Sky Association. So that's in the packet as well. After we've kind of looked at this and been reviewing this, the thought process based on some of the feedback, and I think just to have a better chance of getting something in place, staff have felt the focus probably needs to be more on that commercial industrial zone properties, and not too much on the residential side. Potentially the residential side could get in the street lighting, but again, that's a struggle we have with any agreements we have with existing utility providers. So that might cause some difficulties there as well. So based on that, we would probably take some of the information from the 2016 ordinance that was drafted before Cochran and the IDA model ordinance, and work on drafting something for you guys to consider. But again, right now, we're really, the focus as far as in staff's minds was really to look at those more commercial industrial type properties.
Well, go ahead, John. Go ahead.
Well, we already have the greatest template in place with the come and go up here by the school. And the fact that happened is just amazing to me. And it's absolutely perfectly engineered and adapted to where the station sits and everything. And I was hoping for Chuck and I have been talking for years about this, along with Jeremy and some other people. If we had the ordinance in place, the press, I mean, our town would be elevated, in my opinion, in the press, just because we're so far out in front of what is surely to come down the road everywhere. And the fact that Come and Go did that, I mean, when you think about it, it's amazing. And I would think they would want to like stand up and pat themselves on the back in the public way as well. So my suggestion is, like, when we get to that place where the ordinance is sort of being drafted, could we have Jeremy or somebody from Public Works come in and maybe give us their 2 cents about how it's going to look and how it's going to lay with regard to the parameters of the ordinance itself, so we can kind of work together with them. And by the way, it's a shame, just put this out there too, that the utility company isn't willing to work with the ideas of what dark sky means in a community like Ozark. And I know that we've had all kinds of struggles with them, and they're not interested in doing anything much unless it's changed. I mean, we're all kind of like in a closed meeting here, so.
Yeah.
But it's frustrating to try to do a dark sky community when the utility company, the main provider of street lights, doesn't even care about it.
Yeah. It kind of address some of the discussions on the Come and Go. I think at this point it's kind of second nature to them, because all their stores have been designed to LEED certification. They don't actually get certified, but they are a pre-approved LEED store, and that's just in their prototype standard. So all their stores nationwide have that LED light, and they are dark sky compliant. They're designed that way. They'd also do drone studies of before and afters of an existing store before they tore it down, and then after the new store is built in dark, just to fly over in the darkness and see how it lights up the night. And it is really amazing how immediately the light is cut off right at the property line. It doesn't spill over. Springfield's they've got an ordinance in place. It's not necessarily a dark sky ordinance, but it just kind of gives parameters and criteria for lighting. It really kind of focuses more on the maximum foot candle light levels at a property line, and then just focusing on downward lighting. So that's kind of that's another way of trying to approach this, of getting something in place initially. But yeah, there is still a struggle, and I don't know if there's been much progress with the utility company as far as any kind of roadway lighting.
Cameron, did we ever get final results of the testing that we did here in town?
I've asked.
Show us anything? Where are we on that?
I haven't gotten much out of that. And the last time I asked him, I still send him data every other week. And basically what he is telling me is because of COVID and students not back, they really haven't had time to digest and produce any information. I will send another request again for some kind of exhibits, just to report back to the commission, to give you guys some ideas of what they're seeing. I've asked him a few times about, do we need to move this device because it's still on top of City Hall? And he's like, no, not yet. Go ahead and leave it in place where it's at now. The initial stuff that he had sent to me, it didn't seem like we were that bad as far as night lighting, but there's just not a lot of lighting I don't think a lot of lighting downtown on the streets and stuff. It's pretty dark even outside City Hall at night when you leave.
Well, it's a good start, and I appreciate you continue to follow through on this. I mean, obviously at some point I'd love to see this on all new developments. Dark sky on the sides of the houses and on the street lamps. I know that's wishful thinking, but we sure would like to see it someday.
Yeah.
The little steps, baby steps, make a huge difference.
I know it hasn't really been a high priority on our list, but what we need to do is we probably just need to go ahead and get something drafted to take to the commission and see what kind of public feedback that might come to the meetings and come out of it. But we will continue to work on getting some kind of draft ordinance proposed to bring to you guys. Again, maybe it's got more in there than we think we can get, and let just some of the feedback kind of remove some of the criteria. But to me, it's better to ask for more than less.
Okay, good deal. Any anticipation of when that might come before us? No pressure. Just curious. This year, next year.
You know what? I think I'd have a goal to try to hopefully have something before the end of the year to you guys, but this year has not been well to us. I mean, it's kind of derailed about everything for our department. So we're just trying to push along the best that we can.
Okay.
Yep.
Thought I'd
Darryl,
ask.
Daryl's got a comment.
Yes, Daryl.
Yes, I know when Jeremy was looking at this back in 16, he had done a lot of research on it and he was very up to date on it. I know he's kind of moved on, but you still might be able to, pull on his resources.
Yeah, that's that 2016 draft, and he has provided me the presentation that two guys I think from MSU came down and presented. So yes, we've had ongoing conversations with him on that. But yeah, it ends up falling to our department. It's something that I've always been passionate about as well, and have dealt with through my career of designing lighting and site lighting and stuff. So yes, but we have continued to touch base with him on what he had gathered before and trying to figure out the best way to approach this and the feedback he can give us from the prior public meeting.
Well, I know
He's still
go ahead, John. Go ahead, John.
He's still very passionate about it. I spoke to him not too long ago about one specific area, and we still talk about it, of course, because I just see it as a real plus if we could just sort of get something in place. And like Chuck said, some baby step protocol. I think it would just make a difference in the way we are viewed, because it's coming, and there's all kinds of evidence now that we can point to, reference with regard to health and all that stuff. Chuck has all that info. But I was just curious. Does anybody, Cameron, do you or the mayor, do you have any feelings about our power company and why they can't be partners with the city on this? Because I feel like that they are really being resistant to any idea that we bring forward with regard to this. Light changes, I ask about one light, for instance. Can we just change this one light out as a template? A couple of years ago, and just got a flat no from the utility company.
Yeah, what I know is that Steve has had several conversations with Liberty and has taken it beyond the local guys here. And I think it's just continuing to look at the agreement that was in the mayor. You might be able to help me, is in place from the 60s or 40s or something, but there's this long-standing agreement that has caused some of the roadblocks on some of this.
John, it's something that we are as irritated about as you are, and it's something we're working on. We're employing some resources that we've never been able to employ before, but it's in the process, and I really can't say much more than that. But we are trying our best to get that changed, and because it's a frustration and it's an aggravation. But
yeah, I understand. So you're kind of over a barrel, no? I mean, they've got you over a barrel. I mean,
maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, this is good though. I mean, this is yeah. So good luck.
Well, back to John's point about a PR, the excitement of the PR, if you start taking those steps towards becoming a dark sky community, the Dark Sky Association itself will send these emails out and these messages out. And once they go out, if you follow them, there's hundreds of thousands of clicks through on the IDA sites where they've sanctioned as a community or as a dark sky, city, which could take years to get to. But it is absolutely a PR gem to be able to have that on our quiver.
Oh, just to be able to say that, I mean, that we are a dark sky community, even if just a part of us is dark sky, like, well, the downtown, that's a great place to start. I mean, it would be a big deal. It really would. And so I'm glad that we're having the discussion about it. We've been thinking about it for a long time.
And Chuck, I believe they've even offered up, they would review the ordinance too. So I think we'd send to them and potentially maybe they can zoom into a meeting and be there for a presentation of an ordinance.
It wouldn't be a bad idea, Cameron, to have the city become a member. I think it's like $25 to become a member. And you can just do that right online.
Do you need anything in place to be a member?
No.
Okay.
Yes, they said that they would definitely give us whatever help that they possibly could to get us moving in the right direction. They were fully aware of the tests that we were doing. They're aware that we're interested in this. When I met with them a year and a half ago, they know who we are, and they really they would love to see us move forward on this.
But once again, Liberty has to become our partner,
Yes.
I think, as opposed to our employer.
Right, and that's why ordinance would focus on those private developments that would kind of keep Liberty out of that. So if we can at least get that going and
Right.
utilize Come Go as that example. And I honestly, I think McDonald's is even kind of steered to that direction as well. And most of these bigger chains that have updated their prototypes kind of made that transition to be more green, if you will, and then just to reduce any kind of electric bills or utility bills.
Okay, what else you got?
Okay, the next one on the item, just to get some feedback on is we've been discussing and I apologize, Nathan had to jump off and he had warned me in advance that he'd have to jump off here at 7. But something he's been kind of discussing with us as well is this Finley River Overlay District. I have not heard anything back, but we did work with a local consultant to make an application for a grant. Not sure the likelihood of getting that grant, but we've got our fingers crossed. But this grant would actually perform a corridor study on the Finley River. A lot of it is focusing on water quality, any septic issues, sewer infiltration, and those items. But we would be able to utilize this study to maybe kind of help draft an overlay ordinance. In the ordinance, the discussions have been to kind of establish some criteria as far as what development could occur along the corridor, maybe what's appropriate, setback of the streams. Nathan kind of mentioned in the conditional overlay, but if we had something like this in place, it might kind of help utilize or guide future development along the Finley River. Of course, it would coordinate with the floodplain in our floodplain ordinance. That's another ordinance that at some point we'll be bringing to the commission. The state is actually updating some of their ordinances, which we'd have to in turn revise our city ordinance that we have on floodplains. Consideration of any kind of materials or paving materials along those corridors, just to kind of help reduce runoff or pollutants getting into the river. And then of course the stormwater runoff, and then stream bank stabilization. The deteriorating in the river banks is a big concern, and it was kind of brought up at one of the previous, I believe it was one of the breakfast meetings to the board, just up by Riverside Inn property, that area there, you can really see how the stream bank has changed over the years. And then just to provide a continuous pedestrian corridor and wildlife corridor along on that river. The Finley is a great asset and amenity that the city has, and I think just trying to preserve that the best we can and do what we can to kind of control some of that development to not deteriorate any further is ideal. So just something we'd plan to be drafting at some point and bring to the commission for further discussion and consideration of an ordinance.
Okay. Anybody got any comments on that? Yes, sir. Go ahead, Daryl.
I know back years ago, and I always say years ago, but it has been, I approached the city about possibly using the Finley River as a water source for the community. And at the time, they said the Finley wasn't large enough for any kind of water source, public water source. Does that still hold true? Or I mean, we have this river that's running through our community, and there's got to be some ways to really take a benefit from it.
Yeah, I imagine that's the case. Generally, those water sources have to be larger bodies of water, such as a lake with some depth to those. But I imagine that probably is still the case. The water quality, maybe, I'm not sure the water quality now to years ago. In some cases, you may think it's worse. In some cases, it may be better. But I'm not sure it would offer a good continuous supply of great water quality. And I suspect that's still the case.
Yeah, I know the city of Springfield pulls out of James River. And James River is larger than Finley, but I don't know that it's, I mean, they're pulling out of pretty close to the source of the James River. And it's not, I don't know the volume comparison from James River to Finley, but maybe we can't get all of it, definitely we can't, have our, but we are on wells, and wells can go bad pretty easy.
Yeah,
And if this is maybe just a backup or something.
I guess I'd have to look into it. I'm not familiar with them pulling out of James River unless it may be at Lake Springfield, which kind of is that body.
No, it's the way I understand it. You know where their treatment plant is over on 65? They have a treatment plant, and they have the utilities, the windmills and stuff like that there.
Oh yeah, off Blackman Road.
Yes, as far as I understand, and I've not been to their inlet, it's just kind of back towards that way,
Yeah, I think you're right.
kind of in
It's up
between
by the
Springfield
Crichton.
Lake and yeah.
Okay, you're right. There is something back there, and I think is an old, used to be some, maybe it had been a dam there or something one time. But you're right. There is a pump or something back in that area that's a kind of a fairly large structure around it. I forgot about that.
Okay, what else we got?
The last thing I had on here was just really pavement materials. We do often get requests about mainly parking lots being paved with something other than concrete or asphalt, or that's hard surface material. We do accommodate in our ordinance of any kind of pervious type pavements. I mean, they can still use a grass paver or a pervious pavement as long as it is a concrete type material. I know we've seen requests recently on some other ideas, and in the PUD from the mill, they had some gravel discussions. In addition to kind of the Finley River overlays, or some considerations maybe to allow a different material in those areas, just to help infiltrate some of that storm water in the ground and help purify or clarify that water. So at some point, we may be bringing something back to you guys as far as additional paving material considerations. Maybe we don't identify anything specific, but leave it open for an applicant to provide as a consideration, as opposed to just being firm. It's got to be concrete or asphalt.
Okay. Yes, Daryl.
I think in the past, when you mentioned gravel, when you get into the gravel situation, we really need to put restrictions on it because of the dust and stuff like that. I mean, we can't have parking lots out here with gravel on it. Trails, yeah, maybe in enclosed areas and stuff, but if we go with the gravel, it needs to have some major restrictions.
Yeah, we're anxious to see how the gravel turns out for the mill. So far, it hasn't been a dust issue, but I do know it gets pretty muddy. I'm surprised that they're happy with that, but yes, definitely the dust would be an issue, and then also the stabilization. You would probably need to implement a geogrid with that to help stabilize that. And I know the fire district in the ambulance district would even have concerns as well.
Okay. Anything else? Any final comments from anyone? Cameron, I know you guys are swamped and really busy, and I'm gonna preface this or try to sandwich it the best I possibly can. Any thoughts on that email that I sent about a grant for some training for the OHP side of our house?
We just need to keep after it. I don't even know where that one stands. I've been trying to keep Cheryl after those the best that she can as well. She's trying to work the front counter, but I do not have a good update for you on that. And
yeah, I'm not adding any undue pressure, but just to kind of keep it a little top of mind.
Yep. What I would recommend is if there's something you're still waiting on and we haven't responded, just keep after us. Send us emails like, hey, where are we at with this? And we'll do the best we can.
I just did.
Well, you may have to remind me again in writing.
I can do that. Anybody else got anything? Okay, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Have a second?
Oh, second.
Okay, all in favor? Say aye.
Yow.
Aye.
There we go.
Aye.
Thank you all very much. See you in about 2 weeks.
All right. Thanks,
Amanda. Does the
Yeah.
cat play the cello?
No, she only listens to it. No, I play the
Okay.
cello.
What's the cat's name? I got to know the cat's name.
Lucy.
Ah, Lucy. Okay, cool.
Mhm.
In
After
the
Lucille
sky.
Ball.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, great, perfect. Goodbye,
All
everybody.
right. Bye.
Thanks for doing this, Cameron.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.